Hi folks, Nathan Pierce here with another episode of the Frontline here in Sacramento. We're going to look at a few bills today and also a word of encouragement and some resources. So let's get into it. Welcome to the Frontline with FPM, where we talk about California politics, homeschool freedom, parental rights, and the family. I'm your host, Nathan Pierce, and thanks for joining us today. Let's jump right in and see what's going on here on the front line. All right, I want to start with the word of encouragement today, and today it's from Psalm 18. This is a psalm of David, the servant of the Lord, who addressed the words of this song to the Lord on the day when the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. Just want to read the first few verses from Psalm 18. It says, "I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemies. The cords of death encompassed me. The torrents of destruction assailed me. The cords of Sheol entangled me. The snares of death confronted me. In my distress I called upon the Lord. To my God I cried for help. From his temple he heard my voice, and my cry to him reached his ears." I want to just encourage you today that when we pray to God and ask for his help, he is there. And he does hear our prayers, just like David said that his cry to God reached God's ears. Our prayers to God today don't fall on deaf ears. Rather, God hears our prayers. And it's the same God that delivered David from the hand of Saul. And it's the same God that brought Noah and his family through the great flood. The same God that brought the children of Israel out of slavery in Egypt and into the promised land. And so we can trust him, and we know many have gone before us, and we can appreciate the faith that they had. And I hope that you can join with me in appreciating that today, appreciating that God hears our prayers. So with that word of encouragement, I hope it is an encouragement to you. I want to get into a couple of bills, and then I'll share a few resources at the end. So we have been dealing with the legislature going through sort of the middle ground of getting going on legislation here in Sacramento. And what I mean by that is we dealt with the big, huge drop of bills where we had almost 3,000 bills dumped in February, new pieces of legislation, many of which, as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, were bills that were I refer to as spot bills. And spot bills are bills that are introduced even though they don't have language in them yet. They are placeholder bills because they are still working on the details and they don't have the wording yet. So they just put in a code section number and reference what kind of vague notion they want to be addressing. And they introduce that bill even though it doesn't do anything. Then, once they have time to hammer out the details, they do an amendment. That's a change to the bill to make it actually do something. And so we're starting to see a number of amendments right now in the legislature, changing bills from what they were introduced as, which didn't really do anything, to something that's more detailed and actually puts language into the code that actually does something. So we're going to talk about a couple of bills that are moving forward in the legislature. There's also, as we go forward, we're starting to see a bunch of bills get assigned to committee hearing dates. So some of these bills that I'm going to mention have been assigned to a committee hearing date. Right now, for example, I've mentioned a couple of mandatory kindergarten bills previously. AB 2226 is a mandatory kindergarten bill that's in in the Assembly Education Committee, and then there's a bill that's in the Senate Education Committee. That's SB 1056. Both of these are mandatory kindergarten bills that have exemption language for private schools, including private homeschool students. And the Assembly bill in Assembly Ed is not yet set for a hearing date, but the Senate bill is. That's set for a hearing on April the 10th. And so we'll see that one get heard probably in the Senate Education Committee on that date, unless they cancel the hearing. Now, these bills, you can see, if you're interested in tracking this along with us, you can look this up on our bill tracker page on our website, fpmca.org/bill tracker. And you will be able to find out information about what the status of these bills is. And as we move through the process in the legislature, you'll be able to find information about these bills and details on any changes that are going on, any action steps that we have for you, and the ultimate outcome of the bills at the end of the session. So that's a couple of bills on mandatory kindergarten. There is a bill, AB 2998, that we're kind of awaiting further details because I expect it to be amended more. This bill deals with minors. Its title is Minor Consent to Medical Care. And if you remember, over the last couple of years, we've seen some bills that grant rights to minors to allow them to make certain medical decisions for themselves and to accept treatment. And this bill expands on that for children down to the age of 12. AB 2998 adds to some of those provisions specifically relating to treatment for drugs and alcohol problems. So that's AB 2998. That bill has been assigned to a committee hearing on April the 9th. But I do think that it's probably going to get a few more details amended into it. So we'll be keeping an eye on that bill for sure. I also wanted to mention that there's a number of bills related to education, to public schools, to private schools, that we keep an eye on every year. Last year, if you recall, there was a bill dealing with safe drinking water, and it had to do with lead testing in water in schools. And that bill actually initially, as it was written by Assemblymember Holden, had a provision that would require all schools to get their water tested. Government standards were going to be followed in sending in people to test the water pipes of every school, including private schools, including private homeschools. So that means that private homeschoolers' homes would be tested, and that if you were found to be outside the parameters that the state set up, then those pipes would have to be redone or abandoned and replaced. And so it was kind of an ordeal to go through getting some amendments to that bill over the last couple of years, but we did manage to get some amendments, and ultimately Mr. Holden's bill didn't make it all the way through. There was a lot of cost issues with it, and ultimately it was only applying to public schools. Then it didn't pass at the end of the session, at the end of the year. And so there's a new bill by Mr. Holden to do a pilot program. This is going to be the lead testing pilot program for schools. It's an expansion of the California Safe Drinking Water Act, and it does address drinking water at schools. But right now, it only addresses drinking water at public schools in this pilot program. So we're going to be following this carefully and closely, but right now it's not cause for alarm for private schools or private homeschools. So we'll keep you posted on that if any changes cause us to be concerned about it. So I just wanted to also point out to you some resources to perhaps help you with understanding a correct perspective on government and the different spheres of authority that we've talked about on this podcast before. I found a resource that's come out a couple of years ago. It's called Family, Government, and Church. And this resource, this is a book by Brett Laird, and it is available on Amazon. It gives you a little bit of an idea, an overview of the different spheres of authority and some of the chapters. I'll just read you some of the titles. The believer's attitude and perspective, when to submit and when to obey, identifying government overreach and intrusion, checks and balances. So this is a helpful resource to help you think through some of those issues related to government. Also, a book by Mark Dever, God and Politics, is also a helpful and encouraging read to help you have a right perspective on government. And I know that it can be discouraging in the midst of a lot of the things going on in our government and the elections going on a couple of weeks ago and then coming up this fall, that there's some frustration. Obviously, there's no perfect person running for office or voting for that matter. So we have to remember that none of us are perfect. And we also have to remember that we play a role in our government in the United States. And so it's our duty to participate in these elections and participate in government and speak up and use our voices that God's given us to really be a voice in this culture. So I would encourage you to do that. There's also another resource. It's actually a book that's not out yet, but it is coming out soon. It's called The War on Children, and it's going to be really useful. I think if you have time to read through that, it's a book that helps you think through the war in the culture on children, and it's something that we need to all be aware of. And for sure, most people are aware that there's something going on, but I think it goes into it a little bit deeper to help you understand how serious this war is in our culture on children, and how there are so many people that are really taking advantage of children and really chasing them down to try to force them into a worldview. And it's not something that we can let go of. We have to engage in this culture and for the hearts and minds of our children. So I would encourage you to get engaged in these things. Also, I think it's important for us to know how to engage. And I mentioned our Bill Tracker page, but I would encourage you to make sure you're on our email list so that you can be ready for getting action alerts from us if you are needed to make phone calls or show up at the Capitol. It's important to have you ready to receive that information. We also have coming up soon a training webinar for getting involved in politics, in government, in a simple way of just reaching out to your local legislators at their district office. And it's a really simple thing that you can do. So stay tuned for information on that. And if you want more information on it, be sure to sign up for our emails on our website at fpmca.org. That's it for this week. God bless, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Frontline with FPM. For more information about the topics we discuss here, check out Family Protection Ministries at fpmca.org and subscribe to our channel.